Now, we know that ethics audits or evaluations are increasingly important. What are these ethics evaluations or audits? What they are is the reduction of an AI tool to its operation in terms of human values. Right? So we all know, of course, say in model cards that Google has us make for our tools and so on. We all know, of course, how we can reduce AI tools to their technical measurements and schematics. What we're trying to do with an ethics audit is reduce the tool, or perhaps better to say, understand the tool purely in terms of its ethical effects in the human world. So what an ethics audit does is it asks, what are the human effects of an AI tool? What will it do to humanity? And how could we use, and how could or should, or how do we want to use these tools? Now, how does one do an AI ethics audit? As I say, this is very fluid because it, this entire world is so new, but there are some groups that have developed a history of doing these audits. I have participated in one of those groups, and we have over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, almost 5 years now, published numerous papers, which are actual applications of AI audits. If you Google my name in AI evaluation, you will find them. Uh, there is a history of audits and evaluations that has been published and that is available. Nevertheless, the task is obviously giant, right? There are new AI tools every day. I believe that my group has evaluated 5 or 7 tools altogether in the last 5 years or so. So there's quite a bit that has not been done. There's quite a bit left to do. So I can say on the one hand that as I say, the field is still developing and fluid. But on the other hand, we do have some experience. There are real publications of real AI audits by real ethicists and real computer science programmers working on real existing AI tools. They exist. And what we're going to talk about now is how those, or at least the ones that I have been involved in, how those are produced. Now, basically, an AI ethics audit will have 3 segments to the process. The first is establishing the socio-technical scenario. The second is the evaluation process itself. And then finally, a report or a recommendation process. Very quickly, as an overview, the socio-technical scenario is the understanding that stakeholders come to about what the tool is and what the tool does and what kind of interactions with human beings it will have. The evaluation stage, the second stage, renders those human interactions into a coherent set of ethical classifications and tries to understand in ethical terms how this tool is affecting human experience. Finally, in the third part, the report and recommend, these ethical aspects of the tool are documented, and in some cases, recommendations are made with respect to specific ethical problems or dilemmas that may have been located in the evaluation. Though it must be recognized that the main idea is not to find problems. Uh, an ethics evaluation is not about investigating to find a problem with the tool or something that needs to be fixed. It's not an inspection. An ethical evaluation is simply a review of how the tool works on the human level, and therefore in terms of human values. Now, sometimes in the process of that review, uh, problems may be located, but it's more common that what arises are simply ethical questions that need to be answered subsequently. So we've seen throughout the seminar many cases where this kind of these kinds of uncertainties have arisen. For example, going all the way back to the start, in the very first meeting, we talked in the What is Ethics seminar about the classroom that was AI engineered, and the students were wearing the headbands that captured their electromagnetic brain waves and then translated those somehow into a score that measured, presumably, their focus on their schoolwork. Now, whether or not that's true, that actually works, I don't know. But what we said was important is that we saw things there like questions about human autonomy. We said, on the one hand, these tools constrain human freedom because students feel like they are being, and they are, under the tight observation of the professor all the time. On the other hand, if the tools actually function well and they gain better educational skills, that would seem to increase their freedom or autonomy in the future. So it's not that there is something wrong or right about the tools. It's that there's a question we ask. Which one is worth more? The future autonomy we could gain, the freedom we could gain by using these tools if they increase our abilities, or is the penalty too great in terms of the freedom we lose today as students because we are being monitored in the classroom? How do we make that decision? Why do we decide one way or the other? That's what an AI ethics is about. AI ethics evaluation or audit is about. It's very rare that an AI ethics audit or evaluation is about finding something that's wrong. It's instead trying to understand what dilemmas underline this technology. Now, we said, just to close this off, another common problem for many technologies, especially those like hiring technologies we're putting in place in New York, is that on the one hand, we want those technologies to be fair. When people are applying for a job, we want men and women, young and old, black and white, and so on, to have an equal chance to get these positions. So fairness is an important characteristic. So that's the kind of thing we would look for when we do an AI ethics audit of a hiring algorithm. But we also want privacy. We don't want to take more information from users than we need to take. However, these two goals are directly in conflict, as we've discussed multiple times. Uh, if we want to know whether the machine is discriminating against people who are of one race or another, that means we have to ask everyone, what race are you? If we want to know whether the machine is discriminating against people of one religion or another or one age, then we need to ask from every applicant, how old are you? What is your religion? And the list continues. So here again, this is another question that would arise in an AI ethics evaluation. We would say, how much privacy are we willing to give up for fairness? Or how much is fairness worth in terms of privacy lost? And again, there are no right or wrong answers to these questions, but there's a difference. There's a difference between understanding what the questions are and that they exist, and blindly not understanding what is happening on the human level when these tools are used. So that's what goes on with an AI ethics evaluation or audit. And what I would like to do is show you here first a socio-technical scenario. This is a socio-technical scenario in which I was involved. It is a gathering of all of the stakeholders who are involved with respect to a specific AI tool, the one that is being evaluated. And what you do over the course of this period of evaluation is everyone who is involved explains their connection to the tool in language that everyone else can understand. This is terrifically important and much, much harder and actually much more interesting than it sounds. So the tools that we worked on typically were healthcare tools. And therefore we had ethicists like me. We had doctors with specific medical skills. We had software engineers and computer scientists. We typically had some lawyers and perhaps some professionals from hospitals and other people who might be connected to the project in one way or another. Now, what was most interesting about these discussions is that everyone very much speaks in their own very professionalized dialect or language. So doctors say things like, well, this contusion would cause a hernia in the, I don't know, everyone else listening on the call, what are you talking about? We have no idea what you're saying. The language of the medical doctors their frontal contusions and other and abrasions and other things just make no sense to normal human beings. Um, so we ask them to explain what they are saying in ways that the rest of us can understand. And then to be fair, the same thing goes the other way. When I talk about privacy or fairness, people say, well, yeah, I guess I have some idea of what privacy and fairness are, but why, Brousseau, would those things be in conflict? They both seem pretty good to me. So then I have to explain. Well, they're in conflict because. And so you go around the circle of participants in that way, with everyone who is involved in the tool, explaining what their relation is with the tool and how they address the functioning of the tool. Now, of course, the key discussion will begin with those software engineers who built the tool and with those professionals, maybe doctors, who want to use the tool. That's where everything will start. Right? So the software engineers will explain in their language where their training data came from, what kinds of difficult decisions they made when they selected one algorithm or another to shape the final output of the tool. And again, if it's a medical device, then doctors will talk about what kinds of problems they have in their practice, how the tool might be able to solve those problems, where the tool might not work so well to solve problems, or even what new tools could be developed to help solve connected problems. And so you go around in this way with all those participants discussing what they understand the tool to be, how it will work, and what their reaction to that is. And the process is cumulative in the sense that initially the software engineers will give some general thoughts, and the doctors, then maybe the ethicist or a lawyer, and then back to the software engineer again, and around we go until everyone has a strong sense of exactly what it is the tool does. This is called a socio-technical scenario because we're understanding the theater, the place, the way in which the tool works in society. What does the tool mean for society? What problem does it solve? What problems does it create? How does it solve those problems? This is the first step of the evaluation. And typically, or one way because there are many stakeholders, of course, it is always preferable to do this kind of thing face to face. But if you are really trying to get together doctors, software engineers, ethicists, lawyers, and so on, all from different walks of life, in my experience, these meetings have inevitably been online meetings, like you see on this slide. And then it is not just one meeting, but rather a set of meetings, as I tried to indicate when I spoke as kind of a round robin, kind of a heuristic process in which you discover by discovering. The process usually continues over several meetings, perhaps 3 meetings. And in the course of that process, um, the participants also develop some kind of collaborative document which captures the conclusions they have drawn. Now, one very good example of this, or one functional way to do this, is just with a simple Google Doc. And so somebody takes the lead to begin, or some group of people, maybe a representative from the computer science community, a representative, maybe if there's more than one ethicist, maybe one ethicist takes the lead to write the ethical part. If there's more than one lawyer writes the legal part. And so an original document begins to be formed with different sections in which, after these meetings, the various participants inscribe what they learned and what they thought about the discussion. Then, having done that, the document is publicly available. Other people who are involved in the process can then read the document and comment on the document, asking questions. What does this mean? Why did you put this here? How does this problem relate to the problem that John mentioned on page 3? So the process again is very heuristic. It's very collaborative and continuing. Then, once you have the document written up in this preliminary phase, once you have accumulated an idea of what the tool is and how it works, described in a language that everyone can understand, you can move on to the second step of the process, which is the actual evaluation or the audit of the tool. Now, this process works in two directions, from the bottom up and from the top down. From the bottom up, uh, now that we understand the tool, we are all human beings in this group, and so all of us are free to propose opportunities, benefits, problems, concerns, issues, dilemmas that we see inherent in the tool. Going back again to the very first example that we discussed, the classroom with the young students with their their halos, their plastic halos that picked up the electromagnetic waves. Right, you see opportunities. What kinds of autonomy does this allow students? How much more do they learn? This is also a social well-being question. Is there any documented evidence of increased knowledge, better educational outcomes that the students have acquired because they have used these devices? Are there controlled experiments which demonstrate this? How good are these devices? The kinds of opportunities or benefits we look for in the evaluation. Others might say, I'm worried about privacy violations. If we're following the thoughts of students from their very first day in school and then on through the rest of their life, by the time they are 30, 40 years old, they are going to be slaves to their data. Someone who has access to this lifelong datification of their existence may be able to control those students with nudges and other kinds of techniques, incentives, and so on, may be able to significantly control these kinds of people. So the discussion from the bottom up sounds like that. It just sounds like people, you and I, looking at a tool and saying, well, what do we like about this? What works? What's positive? What's good? What are we worried about? What might not work? What should we be careful with? That's from the bottom up. Then from the top down, we just start and work through the principles, autonomy, dignity, privacy. And in each case, we ask, well, does this tool increase or decrease autonomy? Does it increase or decrease dignity? Does it increase or decrease privacy? Now, this top-down approach has two functions. The first is because these principles cover both individual ethics, social ethics, and technical ethics. If you ask all of these questions, that just in and of itself gives you a pretty good humanistic view of what the tool does. So that's the first reason you work from the top down. These values have been chosen to provide, in most cases, a fairly complete view of how the tool will interact with human beings. One reason. The second reason is an organizational reason. Uh, you need some way, when you do these evaluations, you need some way to bring everyone's thinking into a set of common rubrics. This is the most difficult part of the evaluation. Frequently people will have sensations about a tool which they do not initially articulate in terms of one of these values. However, if you allow the evaluation to continue that way, then you just get chaos, right? You end up with just a long list of things that people happen to think about the tool. And that does not help you with that particular tool. And even more importantly, it does not help you compare or evaluate that tool against other tools. In order for AI ethics evaluations to work, in order for them to be functional, there must be a limited set of concerns and opportunities that are discussed and that are understood as being the output of the evaluation. Everything, in other words, needs to be rendered into one of these 9 characteristics. Once that is done, then, as I say, on the one side, we can be confident we have a good, nearly complete look at the tool itself, but we also have ways of comparing this tool with other tools. So, for example, if you have two different ways of designing self-driving cars, it's important that you be able to do an ethics evaluation of each car and also compare ethically one car against the other. So, for example, one concern in driverless cars is that drivers will not pay attention to what's going on around them. Now, hopefully in the future, that will not matter because the car will be very safe and we will not need to worry about it. But as things stand now, driverless cars do need to have a human driver who is paying some attention to what is going on. This is a challenge. This is perhaps an artificial intelligence challenge. How do we ensure this? There are different kinds of strategies. One strategy might be a heavy AI strategy that uses cameras inside the car and that cycles information maybe about how long the person has been driving, what time of day it is. Maybe if that tool is connected to their phone, that the tool would have access to what the person has been doing, how long they've been awake, how busy they have been. All these kinds of pieces of information might be able to be funneled together to give a sense of how alert and attentive the driver might be at any moment. Um, and of course, it would be cross-reference with visuals that you capture at the moment. Is the driver looking at the road? Are the driver's eyes closing? Is the driver holding his or her phone? I mean, all these kinds of pieces of information might be able to be drawn together by AI to help guarantee that humans are in the loop, so to speak, in the driving of the AI car. That would be one approach. And then you could think there, well, that's a lot of privacy. Is the performance value or the social well-being value? The social well-being value is clearly that the car will not do crazy things. Is that social well-being value worth the loss of privacy that is required to run all this information on the driver all the time? Or perhaps is a different kind of, maybe perhaps a much simpler tool is preferable. Maybe a tool should just be devised to monitor the driver's hands and ensure that they are on the wheel at all times. And that's it. Much simpler, much less data. How does that tool, on the question of performance, very significant value, how does that tool, the hand on the wheel tool, compare in terms of performance with the data intensive tool we talked about initially? Which one is better? Which one is better for social well-being? Which one saves more lives? So you start to work through these kinds of questions, but you can only work through them. You can only compare one technique against another in the area of driverless cars. Is if you have an ethical, I don't want to use the word formula, but let's say an ethical structure which brings together and organizes the various opportunities, positives, negatives, benefits, and harms that surround these tools, which brings them together and organizes them in a coherent way that people can use to quickly access and compare the ethical profile of one or another tool. So, to sum this up, an AI ethics audit proceeds through two steps. First, everyone has to understand what we're talking about. That means engineers have to put their ideas about data science into language that everyone can understand. Ethicists have to do that too, and doctors and everyone else who's involved. Then once everyone understands what the tool is, then you do the evaluation. The evaluation does have a purely human component in which people just freestyle, talk about what kinds of thoughts they have about the benefits and harms of this machine. That's the bottom up. It also has a top-down component, which both ensures that the machine is more or less evaluated from every angle, and more importantly, I believe, allows all of the discussion to be organized underneath 9 rubrics. So every benefit and every harm is located somewhere in that table. And once you have that, then you have both a positive evaluation of this tool and a way of comparing the ethics of this tool with the ethics of another tool. You have the categories set up. You know, for example, that one tool does well in privacy, one tool not so much. You know that a certain tool increases human autonomy. You know that a different tool does not, but perhaps instead it increases social well-being. It's possible to have a comparative ethics conversation because you've organized your ethical findings. That's the key aspect of the top-down part of the ethics evaluation or ethics audit. And it depends upon, to conclude, it depends upon taking everything that you have thought with respect to how the machine interacts with human experience and forcing it. Yes, you do have to force it. Sometimes it's not a comfortable fit. Sometimes it's an awkward fit. So there are some aspects of the machine that don't fit perfectly well into these categories. You force it into one category or another so that it works. Let me give you an example. One question we have that I've been dealing with recently, I'm going to use just an example that I was just dealing with yesterday. Yesterday, I was talking with a company about recommendation algorithms, and we were talking about how these algorithms frequently give back to the individual. They repeat different forms of things they've already liked. So, for example, in Netflix, it's clear if you like a certain kind of action adventure movie like Mission Impossible, then Netflix will recommend for you another action adventure movie like, say, Die Hard or something. Um, so there is in these recommendation algorithms for movies, but they also function for jobs. LinkedIn recommends jobs for you. That's a recommendation algorithm. And there is for personal life, dating apps recommend people for you. That's a recommendation algorithm. Um, there is the potential for these tools to keep giving you back the same thing you've already enjoyed and liked. Now, there is a sort of freedom problem here because it seems like it becomes very difficult to discover new things. So there's an autonomy criticism or harm that might exist. But there's also, we were discussing yesterday, there's also an authenticity benefit. If people find out who they are, or part of the way that people find out the kind of woman or man that they like, the kind of job they want, is by narrowing down their options. Right? So they like kind of job A, B, and C. And so Netflix only gives them recommendations A, B, and C. It doesn't waste their time with other stuff. Then they try jobs A, B, and C, and they find they like B and C better. So now A is no longer recommended. And then later they discover they like B better than C. So now type B is no longer recommended. It seems like there's something very, very positive and authentic about that. It seems like these recommendation algorithms help people discover who they are. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's true that they take away some human freedom, but they help us find the kinds of things that we want, that we truly want, and that we continue to want. Now, some people object and say, well, you only want those things because you're not being given other choices, and the debate never ends. But for those who defend that, the position that the tool is helping us find out who we are. We were talking yesterday, and they were saying, so this tool has the benefit of authenticity. A recommendation algorithm shows us over time, narrows down the possibilities to the things we truly and really want. It shows us who we are. It creates authenticity. You know, the kind of woman I will find after going through many and many people on the dating apps will be the kind of woman who is right for me. And that's good. That's authentic. The kind of job I will find will be the one that is right for me. It authentically fits who I am. The problem is authenticity is not in this list. Now what? Right? We have this benefit, authenticity, but we don't know what to do with it. So what do you have to do? You have to squeeze it in somewhere. So we squeezed it into the idea of dignity. We said part of what human dignity means is the ability to be who you are. And so we put it into that category. Um, the process of AI ethics audits is imperfect. It will never be perfect. There will never be a set of categories which perfectly captures for every tool, every part of the human experience. However, in order to just perform an evaluation of one tool and compare one tool against another, you do need a limited set of categories and you need to force human experience into those categories. So these are 9 categories, and you can force any tool, all of its human interactions, into some place in that list of categories. So as I said, we took the idea of authenticity. That was what we got from when we worked from the bottom up. When we just talked about the human experience. That's what bubbled up. The idea that recommendation algorithms are great for human authenticity. We just couldn't fit it in here, so we put it into the subject of dignity. Okay, so that's the second step. The second step is the evaluation step. Now we move to the final step, which is the report and recommend step. This is a true report from a third step report from an ethics audit in which I was involved. We're going to talk more about it in a second. Um, and what this report does is it captures the various ethical benefits and harms and dilemmas that exist for a tool. Um, in our reports, the focus was on fleshing out the ethical aspects so that people can make good decisions. It was not so much about making decisions for others, but the report could be construed either way. Right? The report could be either built to simply determine and describe what the ethical horizon looks like, what opportunities are there, what harms, what dilemmas exist. Or you could go one step further and say, in response to those dilemmas, we recommend you do A or B or C. Either way, it is a report at the end. So, to conclude, there are three aspects to an AI ethics evaluation. The first is the most interesting and fun. It is the socio-technical scenario in which everyone is forced to talk like a normal person. They can't use the jargon and the slang of their own profession. Everyone has to talk in a way that everyone else understands. And in this way, everyone learns to understand the tool. The second step is the evaluation phase. And here, let me say in the first step, the people who take the lead are the software engineers and the professionals associated. So if it is a medical tool, it would be software engineers first, and then doctors. They would be taking the lead, and then people like me, ethicists, would follow along after. Then in the second step, the evaluation phase, the ethicist would step forward and take the lead, and we would organize this dual form of discovery in which we would ask people to discuss just in human experience. Well, what do you think about this tool? Like, what does it make you think of? Just brainstorm. And that's how we came to the idea of authenticity yesterday. So you do that on one side. On the other side, you work more professionally through the theories from the top down. I describe what the theory is. Autonomy is X. Here's an autonomy question here. There's a privacy question here, and so on. That's the second step. And then the third step is you write all that up um, as a final report.